I told him, I was like, this is the prototype and I can do a better job for you. The corners aren't lining up. And I was pointing out all the flaws. And he looked at me and he goes, stop selling it to me. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, every time you say first one prototype, I want it more. and I didn't think about it at that time because I just looked at the flaws in what this was. Now I look at it and go, oh my gosh, those flaws are beautiful.
Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Shafer of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm so glad you're here. I'm a physician, mom, coach, musician, author, publisher, and I'm passionate about helping others reclaim their stories so they can build their most beautiful future. Today, we have such an inspiring artist on the show. Steve Barton creates stories and worlds with his paintbrush. Steve began painting at the age of 8, inspired by his mother, who is also an artist. Steve went on to hone his skills as a painter over decades, moving from the East Coast to Southern California. His beach vibes and affinity to vivid colors are prominently featured in his paintings, which show natural scenes from sunsets to seaside. Steve also shares the heart behind his art and how he has discovered much about himself on his journey as an artist. Steve invites us to see the extraordinary and the ordinary moments and to find beauty in our everyday lives. Steve, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm super excited about it. And yeah, I want to share my art. But the idea of sharing just not my art is the heart behind it and why I love doing it and why you should do it. That's the biggest thing. I always tell people, I'm like, you should paint because, it's like athletes. I am never going to be a professional basketball player, but I love throwing the ball at the hoop. And if you have that in mind, that it's not going to be perfect, you're not going to look great doing it, but you're going to enjoy doing it. And I think that's the important part of art.
And no one was born a professional basketball player, right?
No.
They had to change that language. It's funny you framed it that way because I have a tool I use with people called the butt wheel, and that's cheeky and funny, and it makes people go, what? But it's actually taking the butt and turning it around. So you said, I'm never going to be a professional basketball player, but I like to throw hoops. What we can do is we can take that belief and say, I like to throw and make hoops. Instead of saying but I'm not going to be this thing, maybe I'm not a professional basketball player, but I like to do this. Or maybe I'm not a professional painter today, but I like to paint. And every day that you paint, you're building on that skill because we weren't born painters. We weren't born ballers. We had to work on that skill. And that's what I want to start with to introduce our audience to you. I think there's a lore and something really magical when you look at someone like yourself who has taken a dream that many of us had when we were 8, when we were kids. We enjoyed creating, and you lived that dream and you dedicated yourself to that dream and stayed very consistent over the years and built your craft and shared your craft. Can you tell me more about your early experience as an artist and how that's evolved over time?
So as an artist, I just grew up painting. My mom's a painter. This is what I did. I struggled with a lot of other things in life where I'm really dyslexic. And so I struggled in school, in the mainstream school. But I excelled in painting. And it was in kindergarten, they were like, oh, you color really well. I mean, that was the thing. And then painting with my mom and everything else. So we weren't concerned with, I hate to say this, any academics in my house. My mom had the same learning disabilities, and she's like, just do what you love and do it consistently. And we were allowed to set up and paint anywhere in the house that we wanted. If it was in the middle of the kitchen, setting up an easel and painting, my mom's like, you do that as long as you come back to it every day. As soon as you don't go back to it, you have to clean up your mess and put it away. So that was what we did. I mean, if I wanted to paint in the living room, I set up an easel and painted in there. And my mom didn't care if we got paint all over everything. And it was just, which is kind of crazy to think about, because now I have a white couch, and I kind of stay away from that. But with being said, is I paint everywhere, and I'm so used to doing it. And if you saw the inside, well, you can kind of see a little bit of my studio. It's a disaster. It's paint all over the floor. I got paint on the dog over there, the cats, everything else. So there's paint there. But as long as you stay consistent at it and enjoy what you do, I think it'll work out.
I think there's such a beautiful demonstration of that you have framed behind you. I believe it's something that I've heard you speak about before. Your palette that you had as a boy.
Yes, that is my very first palette my mom gave me. And at my very first solo show in Laguna Beach, I retired the palette. And so, and then the gallery framed it. It's been in that particular frame for almost 25 years, 26 years. And so it's been around, and I've carried it to everywhere I've been. I drove it across country in my red Jeep. So it's been everywhere with me.
It's beautiful, and I think it really showcases something I've heard you talk about this as well. It's easy to not celebrate what it took to get us somewhere, especially when, as you said off camera before we got started, you want to get something done, like turn to a busy person, because that's a person who does things, right? Like, you're a person who does things. Like, you have this physical catalog of art that shows that you're a person who creates and you do things and you're motivated. And I think it's really easy for us to just keep going and not celebrate and not give credit to everything that got us where we are. And so I think there's something so beautiful and symbolic about having that initial experience that you had with your palette and creating framed and with you everywhere you go in your studio as a constant reminder. What does it mean to you?
It's it just brings back wonderful memories, to be honest. Every time I glance over at it, and maybe I run my hand across it, because it's like 3 inches thick of paint over the years. And I'll just touch it once in a while, and it'll just remind me of where I came from and what I used to paint, to what I do today. Now, I used to paint in only oils, and then I switched over to acrylic a few years back. And so that is oil, and I probably scrape some down. There'd still be a chunk of wet paint on that. It's going to be a forever piece. It's always going to be drying, I think. So, which is fairly amazing. So, and I look at that, I'm like, it's forever. And it's always slightly changing. Now I have my palettes here, and this changes all the time because I yank it out, throw it away, and start over again. But that's constant.
I don't know specifically what the name of that type of palette it is, or if it's even something that you just created out of something else, repurposed. But I'm curious to know, because for people who are listening, often we're listening, not watching the podcast. You showed a more like rectangular, almost like not a baking dish, but a baking sheet type shape. So can you talk about the evolution from that very traditional palette that you have hanging behind you to this shape, and why it works for you with the art you're creating now?
So with that particular palette is a traditional old palette, and it's made for oils, and you scrape it off and you start over. The palette that I use today is more of a stay wet palette, because I'm working with acrylics, and it has a sponge underneath to keep my acrylics wet enough to me. It's kind of the in-between thing between an oil paint and acrylic. Acrylic dries fast. You push oils to dry them faster. So you use mediums, which the mediums are bad for your system. So that's why I don't use oil paints anymore, because it was just building up in my liver, all the toxics. So then I switched to acrylic, and that's been better, because at one point my liver was like 30% cirrhosis, and I don't even drink. It was just built up of toxics and things that I did. And I was probably mixing things together I shouldn't have been, like cobalt dryer and Japanese dryers and everything else to get my paints to dry quicker. So now I'm just the opposite. Now I'm trying to slow my paints down so I can get the same effect I can with an oil. So it's
Wow.
there's a balance.
That's really interesting. I had never heard of that before. I'm sure, anytime you use a substance, right? A substance, you look at the do not do this. But when you're dealing with paint, it's not like medication. It doesn't necessarily have all those side effects with it.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, learning about it now versus what I did then. Now I'm a big preacher of, hey, you should try acrylics. Oils are great. I love them, but make sure you have the proper ventilation.
Yeah, that's a
So,
really good tip. Thank you for
yeah.
sharing that. That's
Oh,
not
you're
something
welcome.
that I had encountered as a neurologist because it's a bit out of my wheelhouse. But I imagine that there would, be neurological. We certainly get neurological side effects to hepatic issues, to liver issues, to cirrhosis, right? And so we want to know not just what the problem is, but what's causing the problem.
It was an interesting story. I'll make it really short. Went to the doctors and they said, "Oh, you should quit drinking." And I looked at him. I said, "I don't drink. Maybe a beer once a month, maybe." And he's like, "No." And then my wife started answering for me, and they're like, "Can your wife leave the room so you can tell me the truth about your drinking problem?" And I'm like, and she's like, "He doesn't, and I'm not leaving." and so so we went that way, and I'm like, I'm seriously, I don't. So then we had to work through the process of accepting that I wasn't a drinker, and then working through, oh, I was in my, you know, I was in my studio painting all weekend, and I was using a bunch of Japanese dryers and everything else, so it elevated everything. So then, now I got really good ventilation fans on top of switching to acrylic.
Wow. I feel
And
like this conversation helps our artists as well as our doctors because we have doctors who listen too, who, it's just not something you'd necessarily have on your differential. And yes, like doctors kind of joke. This is a little secret, a doctor secret we're sharing, but, people will say, they have 3 to 5 drinks a week, and doctors generally will assume that there's a multiple there, the multiplier
mhm,
that's not being spoken, just because unfortunately people have shame, and we don't want you to have shame. We want you to tell us what's really going on. But unfortunately, because of that, there is this common thought that maybe we're not getting the whole story and we want to try
yeah,
to get it. But I'm so glad that you persevered, and your wife, and you were able to communicate the real problem. Because if you didn't do that, and if they didn't believe you, then you wouldn't know what to stop doing.
right. Oh, and if they would have said, "Hey, how many donuts did you eat a month?" and I'm like, "Oh," I'd look over at my wife and go, "One every couple hours." No, just kidding. But yeah, no. But I'm a sugar fanatic, so everybody has their thing.
They
Or
do.
cups of coffee, like espresso. I got the espresso machine warmed up, still giving me coffee right now. So yeah.
I'm definitely no stranger to that. And I can tell you most physicians probably are in the same boat with that. I want to talk about, so I'm so glad that you identified that problem, were able to make a switch, and hopefully it's had a positive impact on your liver health. I want to talk about how, so as a young child, you were having the experience of working alongside your family, and building your repertoire as an artist, having your first showing, all of these things. But then, as I understand it, you came to a point where you had to make a decision to ensure that you would stay on your path. And I really want to highlight that, because one of the really big focuses we have here on Talks with Dr. Shafer as a podcast is about habits and routines over willpower. Willpower is not really a thing, or at least not on its own. I'm really quick to assert that if you want to change, something has to change. It just can't be that I want it to be different, and then you fail, and then you say, "Oh, I'm just so weak." No, you have to change your habits and your environment. And you decided at a young age that you needed to change your environment in order to make sure you supported the habit or the lifestyle of becoming a full-time artist. Can you share that with us? I think it's a really important story.
So I guess I was about 18 years old, and I decided to become a painter. That's when I made a decision. I'm an adult. I was in college at that time, and I switched from an architectural major because I grew up in construction, heavy equipment, building things, putting pipe in the ground, whatever it was, to wanting to be an artist. And I figured that I could get in and sell it to my family if I was an architect. So I designed the buildings and then, go through there. And then, so I kept falling back into it. Financial reasons, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that. And so at the age of 21, I packed up my Jeep and quit. I said, I quit. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm leaving. And my older brother's like, good luck. And everyone else like, oh yeah, we'll see you in a couple months. And I'm like, no, I'm not coming back. And I literally had about $250 in my pocket, some paints, and I started driving my Jeep. I went down to Florida, did a couple murals, and then came back up, cut across New Orleans, and hit California, and I never looked back. And then when I hit California, I went to a gallery in Laguna Beach, and I was showing everyone my portfolio and everything, and they were all like, oh, and it was a weekend, actually. And so nobody wanted to talk to me. And this one lady goes, you're doing a horrible job at this. Come back on Tuesday and we'll talk. This is where we work. This is our weekend. People, it's busy. We can't take time to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, I took that to heart, put everything back in my little red Jeep, and went to where I was staying. So from that, and then I came back on a Tuesday, or it was a rainy Tuesday morning. There was nothing to do in Laguna Beach. The streets were empty. And I walked back into the gallery and I said, you told me to come back on Tuesday. So here I am. And she looked down over her newspaper and said, okay, I did say that. I'll look at your stuff. And I showed her my stuff and she goes, oh, and I had like Polaroids of my art. I had a little book of Polaroids. So I'm showing her Polaroids. And she's like, well, I'd like to see what this looked like. I'm like, okay. So I was like, oh, it's in my vehicle. And she goes, oh, okay. Well, because everything I owned was in that vehicle because that's where I was living. So I went and got it, brought it to her, and she's like, okay, I like it. Put it on that easel up there and we'll see what response we get. And so that's what I did. But to get her to do that, I bribed her with the last $5 that I had with a cup of coffee and a Danish. And I went and got her a Danish and I put it in front of her. And so then she's drinking her coffee and I'm in the back of my mind, I'm like, I hope this works out because if not, I'm going to have to figure something else out. But later that day, I stopped back by and she goes, oh, I sold that painting. And I'm like, oh, awesome. Very cool. And I was like, so now what? And she's just like, well, you submit submit a bill to us and we pay you and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, great. How do we do that? And so we were moving forward. And so she looked at me and she goes, okay. She basically reached down, grabbed her purse, wrote me a check because she was the manager of the gallery. And I looked at it and I said, okay, now where's your bank? Because I am starving. So that's my rule. I'm like, whatever you do, figure out how you can eat it. Because when it really boils down to, it's eating. Painting's great. I love to paint, but how do you turn it into food? And so that was the day that I really learned on how you turn it into food. So even when I talk to kids and they're doing something they love doing, I'm like, well, okay, how do you eat it? And they look at you and go, what do you mean? And I'm like, how do you turn it into food?
I love that. We're definitely going to clip that out and share that with the world. That's amazing. How do you eat it? That is really important advice. And it may on first glance seem simply materialistic or like, just like, okay, goal, what's the goal? But I think it really helps you hone in on the marketing piece and what is it that I'm trying to share and why and who is my audience and how do I communicate with them? And it gets you out of your head of of just creating for yourself, but now creating for your community. Who's my community? And you, I think, really as an artist stand out as someone who's really found your community, and you found your signature, your vibrant colors, the textured strokes. And then of course I want to talk about the wavy frame and canvas. You have a very distinct presence with your artwork. Can you talk to me about developing that, and how, I imagine hearing how you responded to her, that there were these moments in your work where you're responding to your environment and finding your stride.
I do paint things that I think people will like, palm trees. Now, I grew up painting landscapes, New England landscapes, covered bridges, the old man of the mountain back in New Hampshire, all this kind of stuff like that. And actually in college, I had a professor that was the biggest influence that I've had, because what he said to me one day, and he goes, I was painting to pay for school. So I was doing shows on the weekends and things like that while everybody else was, partying and doing that. I couldn't afford to stay in school unless I sold my paintings. And he looked at me and goes, why are you even here? And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm learning. And he goes, no, you're wasting your time is what you're doing. You need to do what you need to do. And that was the moment I drove to California, because I figured if I failed, I'd figure it out. I'm young enough. If I made it without falling back into the groove of going into construction or something like that. Even I had that thought process even out here. I was just like, okay, I need to work. Because it boiled down to food. I mean, okay, how do I get food and how do I eat, and without calling everybody else? So that's where I'm at on those things. It's just like I love what I do, and it's passionate. And then making the frames is everything that I've done throughout my whole life: construction, woodworking, and it was out of necessity that I made those frames. And it just ended up being wavy because I stretched the canvas a little too tight and it had a bow. But I couldn't throw that canvas away because that was all that I had to work on. So I figured out how to frame it so that I made more waves. And it was a progression to what you see today with my work.
That's amazing. When was that? When was the first wavy canvas?
In 99. And I brought it into a gallery, and I put it on the wall, and I was in a few galleries already. And this was in La Jolla, and I stuck it on the wall, and the owner of the gallery goes, I hate it. The director goes, I love it. And there was a guy behind us that goes, I'm buying it. That was literally how it went down. And I looked at him. I was like 26 years old, and I told him, I was like, this is the prototype, and I can do a better job for you. The corners aren't lining up. And I was pointing out all the flaws. And he looked at me and he goes, stop selling it to me. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, every time you say first one, prototype, I want it more. and I didn't think about it at that time because I just looked at the flaws in what this was. Now I look at it and go, oh my gosh, those flaws are beautiful, because it was the development to what it is today. So don't worry about the flaws. They could be beautiful.
The flaws are, in fact, what make us beautiful. When we think about the people we love, the people we're closest to in our lives, when we think about them, we're not thinking, wow, I really love them because they won a Grammy, or I really love them because they're a doctor, or I really love them because they won that spelling bee in 3rd grade. No, we love their challenges. We love the things that make them our person, the things they share with us, the things they allow us to walk beside them through in life, right? And none of those things have anything to do with perfection.
Yeah.
Mm. That's so beautiful. It makes me think of something that you've spoken about on your social media channel on your Instagram, which is Steve Barton Official. It makes me think about the self-reflection piece of not only creating art, but of sharing art, of selling it. And correct me if I'm paraphrasing this incorrectly, but you shared something to the effect of that creating the art wasn't the difficulty, but believing you had something worthwhile to share, right? That it was worth something was something different for you.
And I tell people about this. I'm like, sooner or later, somebody's going to find out that I can't paint, and they're going to let me know that I can't do it. So sooner or later, this is going to be reality. I get nervous before every show. I've done hundreds of shows. And every time I walk into a gallery, my heart steps up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to do it for one more day. And every time I walk into my studio, I look at it and go, I get to paint for one more day.
Mm.
And I say that 365 days a year. And I come out in my studio, or I pick up a brush wherever I'm at. So I'm really consistent on doing the work, and having fun with it. And here's the thing is, even if I wasn't a full-time artist that supports his family and everything else on art, I still would be painting because it's something inside me that needs to create. I would be painting because it is a major passion in my life. And my world kind of revolves around painting. Um, and that's a whole other topic of, you know, maybe it's too much, but it's a passion.
I wonder when you speak on that, and I'm imagining, I see your studio behind you, and I'm imagining your home life, with kids and now grandkids and your lovely wife, and the stories you reflected about your childhood experience with your parents, with your mother, and how she supported you and encouraged you in part through, direct encouragement, but a lot was just the environment, right? You are welcome and allowed and invited to create in this environment. And we're not going to be too worried about cleaning up after you. We're going to support that. How did your experience growing up in that way and being an artist and being a successful artist, right? I think like so many of us were told who went into art, I went into music as a teenager, we're told, don't do that, do something else, right? So being someone who was supported, who then went on to have children and now grandchildren, how did your journey as an artist and from an artistic family impact the home and environment that you wanted to create for the people in your life?
Art has been a wonderful thing all the way through. Here, let me see if I can show you. Now, that is my granddaughter's first painting she did when she was 1. You see her little footprints up there? So it has been a major part of our whole life here, in the house. We recently redid part of our house, and when we were pulling up the floor, we noticed there was stain marks where we used to stain the frames in our living room because that was our staining department. So there's that. So we, with the children and everything else, it's all part of, it's open. If you want to do it, great. If you have a passion to do it, my grandson was over here last night and we were playing with resins last night. And so we were doing fun things with that. So that's what we do. It's part of everything. And being creative is important because I think there's 2 different types of people in the world. There's the creative, and then there's the non-creative. And the world needs creatives. And a lot of times the creatives get pushed down because we're told that it's not as important as being an accountant. Accountant's important, don't get me wrong, that's super important. But being creative is also really important. And knowing your strengths. Mine's painting. Could be yours was music. Then you became a doctor. So where did it go? Where did it go wrong for you where you had to become a doctor? No, just kidding.
Exactly. Where did it all go wrong? I could tell you, but I don't like to give too much weight to the bad decisions I made when I was 19. But but what I did do is when I reclaimed myself, as many of us do in midlife, people who didn't necessarily have that thing that I think you really, really, really have, this conviction and belief. And I think it's important. I wanted to highlight the story and the undercurrent feeling you have, that we call it imposterism. Some people say imposter syndrome. It's not a true syndrome. So I try to use imposterism that you described, like, they're going to figure out I can't do this. But then you do the thing. Well, you're doing the thing, right? And so many of us, especially earlier in life, really struggled to do the thing scared, right? Or do the thing that's not possible, do the thing that's against your family's wishes, do the thing that your peers aren't doing. But then we get to midlife and something magical happens with our hormones and our life and our age and our development of our brains, where many of us start to be able to look at life differently and say, gosh darn it, I've been doing so many things my whole life, except for the things that I really wanted to do. And I'm going to stop looking at what I can't do. And I'm going to look at all this data that shows that I can do hard things. I can do scary things, even if I haven't done them before, right? Because there is data that I can overcome and I can persist and I can do new things. And now I just need to think, okay, life is finite. What do I want to do with this time? And for me, leaning into creativity and storytelling, whether that's in music, podcasting, conversations. We have a media group where we do local content. We do everything from local events to telling the stories of local legends here in Northern Michigan, where we're based out of. For me, storytelling and conversations like we're having today, that is the heart of life and human connection. And I think one could argue it's the difference from being a doctor who knows your science and being a really, really good doctor who actually can really care for your patients. Because if that communication and storytelling and listening piece is absent, or our skills haven't been adequately honed in doing that, we're not showing up as our best selves, as our best doctor and teacher, which is the etymology of the word doctor. It's truly being not a fixer or solver, right? But a teacher. I'm here to be with you in this moment and teach you, and you take what I'm giving you and decide what you want to build with it.
That's awesome. Yeah, and as you were speaking, I did jump into, like, with kids and where we're at, somewhere in the line of where we grew up. Someone told us we couldn't do it. Someone told it was a bad idea, and we believed them. And storytelling and telling stories and letting them know that they can do it is important. I mean, exactly what you said. I mean, we're missing that human interaction of storytelling. And yeah, and so it was funny because I actually created a coloring book, an adult coloring book for all kinds of things. And that's to get into your inner child, to paint and to draw. And it's so important. So to get that creativeness back of a child again, and to listen, and to just listen to everybody else around you.
We're all an 8-year-old who wants to play with paint and create, right?
Yes.
We all are. Why not give ourselves permission to do it? I really started painting again. I illustrated my daughter's 4th book. She has 3 books that she had illustrated by a Bulgarian artist. And she had a 4th book coming up called Shelter Dogs, that is a fundraiser for animal shelters across the country. And this was a big dream. She'd already raised $9,000 for our local humane society by auctioning off the opportunity to name characters in the book. I mean, it was already its own thing, but she put her foot down and said, I'm not doing this book unless you illustrate it, Mom. And I said, I'm not an illustrator. And she said, what are you talking about? Every day when me and my brother paint, whatever paint is left over that we're not going to use, you don't want to waste. So you take cardboard or paper or whatever is left over and you paint with it. And you have all these little paintings thrown around the house that are on, like the back of a cereal box or whatever. And so for her, it was interesting. It was almost a parentification moment of her saying, no, you're going to do this. And she changed the environment. I wanted to support her in doing her book. It's kind of like you said, no, I've got to move across the country so I don't go back to old habits. She's like, I'm not publishing this book, Mom, unless you illustrate it.
Wow, that's awesome.
She's something.
And how old is she now?
She's 12. She was 10 when she informed me of that requirement.
She's going to be informing you of a lot of things throughout the rest of your life. I'm just like,
I think you're right. And you know what? I love that. I think it's so important that we empower our kids and teach them and give them opportunities to say what they want and how they want it to be. It doesn't mean they always get their way, right? Like you said, you were only going to eat if you sold the paintings. You had to figure out how to turn it into food, right? But no one told you, no one was preventing you from doing it, right? They were empowering you. So there's that balance of like, yeah, we can do this thing. We have to do it in a smart way. We have to do, use our skills and build this in a way that gets us where we want to be. So I think there's so much synergy with all of these different threads that we're weaving together with this conversation. Is there, I'm thinking about the common threads of how you capture the seaside scenes and the palm trees and that departure, as you mentioned, from your earlier landscapes. Is there something that keeps calling you back to this particular landscape beyond that? Of course, it's something that the people who know and love your art, that they're drawn to. Is there something that you take away from that landscape that brings you back to it?
With palm trees, it's the sound of palm trees. It's the way the wind goes through the palm trees and the way the light hits the palm trees. You got the center, you got your fronds. And when I moved to California, I fell in love with palm trees. Never seen them before. I saw them a little bit in Florida, but in California, it really jumped out at me. And then when I started going to Hawaii, it was just even more so. And it's also the refreshing colors in a palm tree. And people are like, what do you mean by that? It's the purples, because a palm tree shades you, but it's not cold. So like when I was painting New England landscapes, when you were in the shade, you were cold. So it's more blues for me. And now when I paint palm trees, it's more of a purple tones. And because it's a refreshing cool, it's still warm, but it's got a little bit of that refreshing feel to it. And for me, refreshing is a purple. So all my paintings base in a purple.
And you are known for your vibrant colors. The way that you phrased that made me curious. Do you think in colors or shapes, like, is there a special way that you think or respond to conversations, things you're experiencing that then translates into your art?
I don't think so. I think it's so instinctual to paint for me. It's just starting. And then once it starts, it flows. It's the first 3 brush strokes of any painting that's the hardest painting to get started. And once you get past that point, it's all smooth sailing. Ideas are all the time. I come up with ideas, but you got them on canvas, sketch them out, and then it's that first couple brush strokes to get where you're going to get started, and to kill that white or the gray tones or whatever color you have back there. It's to put something on it is the big thing. So I don't know if it's shapes, colors, what it is, but for me, it's just moving and to get that brush stroke. I had the hardest painting I ever done in my life was actually on my mother's coffin, graveside. And so I did the very first painting that we ever did together, and it was the last painting we ever did together. And I did it on her thing. But I'll tell you, that was literally the hardest 4 brush strokes that I ever did. I was encouraged. I wasn't going to do it. I was encouraged by my older brother. He pushed the whole thing, and I'm like, no, 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 no. And my wife's like, you really going to do that? And I'm like, oh, I'm just telling him yes to shut him up and move on. You know, he'll forget about it tomorrow. And he was just like, oh, so you're doing it, right? And I'm like, so I did it, and it was the most amazing thing that I've ever was able to do. So it was cool. But tough 4 brush strokes.
Toughest
So
things, the hardest things to start are often the most
rewarding, huh?
meaningful. Yeah, and something that I'm picking up on from the way you talk about your brother is the support, right? When you moved out to California, he was the one that told you, go, when others said, you'll be back. He said, no, you're going.
Going. And, and he did make sure I could eat. He wouldn't let me eat well, but he made sure I had food. And then when the first day I moved to California, I met my wife. And I met her and a few of her friends at goes back to a free buffet food. And so she was selling real estate at the time. And I'm like, oh, you could have these little watercolor paintings to give to your clients. And can I have a bite of that sandwich? So, and then we've been together ever since. It was the first day and never looked back. And we're pushing 30 plus years.
That's so beautiful. And I've gathered from your social media, you guys have these great conversations on it. And I've gathered, that you two have different perspectives, personalities, right? She's quiet. Your wife, Deborah's, how would you, I don't want to mischaracterize her. She's very focused and very practical.
She's very line item driven of getting things done. And I'm like, oh, it's only 80% done. It's fine. I'll get to it later. And she's like, just finish what you started. And so that's always been the push. When we got married, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how? And I started freaking out. I'm like, how am I going to support? Because I was a delinquent living at the beach with a couple buddies. And, it was the Lost Boys Club, we called it. It was, it was Never Never Land. We'd all surf and do something else. When I got married, I'm like, well, I'm going to have to get a job so I can support my family. And she's like, no, you already have that. We're just going to sell your art in more locations. That's what we're doing. And that's what we did. And she owned a house at the time. Such a good idea as a husband, because I was living in basically a Jeep, and she owned a house and everything else. And so she's like, well, we're going to make sure we can do this because I believe in you and I believe in doing this for our family. And she made sure that we were able to afford our first limited edition. And then suddenly after that, it went from being in 3 or 4 galleries to being in, at one point, I think it was almost 60 across the country. And then a few years passed. We did that for a while. And I was losing why I painted, because it was so much about getting things done for people. I was losing that simple connection. I didn't have time to talk to you about, what you wanted or this or that, because I was so busy doing it. she looked at me and she goes, well, we're getting rid of half these galleries today. And I'm like, well, we worked so hard to get them done. This is my identity. I'm in 60 galleries. I'm a famous artist. And she's like, well, you're going to either be alone as a famous artist with a lot less of your stuff, like half, or less than that. She goes, you'll go back to your Jeep. And she goes, or we can do half and do what we love again. And there it is. And then that was a no decision. I'm like, well, you're right. I don't love what I'm doing right now. And so I fell back in love. And that was probably about 15 years ago. And then I fell back in love with what we're doing again. And we've gone forward. And so now we have a rule where we work with people that we want to work with anymore. So there's a little bit more of a saying than that, but we'll just stay there. So no more working with jerks. It's done.
And I think that is also like a great midlife thing that happens, right? You just get jerkitis. You just can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a great ailment to have. Like, I'm really sorry, my jerkitis is acting up. I can't do this. You know how it is once you get to a certain age, you just can't do it anymore.
Yeah, that's it.
You talked about coming back to your roots and falling back in love with your work and your why. And I love how, thinking of that and thinking of the internal process you have every time you paint, every time you go into a gallery, every time you're with someone, and reasserting yourself as an artist, it brings to mind the series that you've been doing on social media, Paint with Steve, where viewers can participate and paint with you live. How has the response been to that? And has that unlocked anything in you as an artist to kind of pull back the curtain and share that experience with people online in your studio, not in a more formal setting like a gallery?
I find it more intimate, and like I tell people, I am not a teacher. You're just painting with me, and I'm just showing you what I do. I'm not showing you step by step. It's kind of step by step, but it's like, okay, this is how I put the first brush stroke on. This is what I do. And it forces me to do something within 45 minutes, that I might start and then bounce over to something else. But we stay focused, we get it done, and we have a great time. But I find it more rewarding. So hopefully someone else enjoys it. I mean, I get really good comments. But I love it. And I love sharing the studio, and I'll spin around and go, okay, this is what I'm using. This is the acrylic that I'm using. This is why I use this. And I just explain why I do things. And hopefully people enjoy it, and we get to have fun paintings doing it. And so, yeah, like I have a little coloring book up there in the corner. I call it an adult coloring book because I want adults to do it. Kids always do coloring books. Adults do not. And and like I said, it's a free download. You don't have to buy anything. It's, if you want to download, make the image bigger. That's what I do. Or you can do it in the coloring book itself. We pulled the images out of that, so the lines are already there. Because a lot of people, they freak out with the first lines getting started. They're like, I don't know how to start. I don't know how to draw. I don't know how to do this. And it's all, I don't. And they talk themselves right out of it. And so with that being said, as a kid, they never talk themselves out of anything. It's always a good idea. So with this, I give you all the reasons why. Here you go. Nope. Here you go. This is the brushes you use. This is why you use them. Let's go. And then suddenly they fall in love with doing it.
I love it. And I love that, one, just your thought process for yourself, but also when you're not an expert at something, you need a framework, right? Willpower is not enough, right? You're not bad because you're not starting something. Something is missing, a habit, something in your environment, like a framework, something's missing. And I love how you're taking your experience and your understanding as an artist who's been painting for decades and decades. There's such a wonderful breadth of of artistic data that you've created about yourself, but still you say, you know, it's those first brush strokes, right? It's always there. They're always the hardest part. And you're sharing that with people. And then people who never started a single painting since they were a kid, because that fear was there, but they didn't know how to speak it. When we speak our fears, they lose so much of their oomph, of their teeth. And now they're just like, oh, well, that was maybe kind of silly, wasn't it? Huh? Yeah, let's just, because guess what? I'm probably going to paint over this, right? My first strokes, I'm not even going to see those.
It's so funny because I have a little class that I teach. It's called How to Paint a Palm Tree. And we start with a straight line across the canvas. And to watch people go, well, where's the line going to go? And I'm like, just draw the line. That's it. And then so the horizon line. And I take off all the erasers, especially with adults. You got to remove the erasers because they'll go back in and try and erase that line, which you will never see because we're going to paint it. It's just a reference point. But it's so, I get such a blast out of watching people draw that line. They're like, they're thinking about it and they'll do this. And I'm like, and I'll walk by and just push the hand and go, there you go. Now we're started.
That's beautiful. The greatest friction is when you're getting started. And as you said, then the magic happens when momentum kicks in and we're going. Oh my goodness. I love it.
Yeah.
Steve, this has been such an incredible and inspiring conversation. I've seen your work in galleries. I've seen it alongside other very prominent artists like Weiland, which I've grown a renewed interest in because I'm actually producing a show about a glass artist here in northern Michigan, and we were lighting up a piece while we were filming, doing the cinematography, and I said, oh, I feel like I'm in a Weiland gallery. And then I'm thinking, oh, and Steve Barton's on the wall right next to the Weiland glass work, right? And so I think it's so beautiful. I saw your work, and it kind of reminded me how you talked about the palette. So these fresh memories for me of being in another tropical place. I've spent time in Southern California, but for me, it really brought up a lot of the memories I have of Key West. I've spent a lot of time in the Florida Keys over my life. And your artwork really brings me there. I don't know if you've ever been to Bahia Honda Beach, which is this really interesting beach in the Keys. I'll send you information
Okay.
about
I'm
this
like,
beach. It's really interesting, and I'll send you a picture I have of a tree that was lost in that horrific hurricane. There was this amazing palm tree that grew sideways and then up. And it was in probably every picture for decades and decades of this beach because it just was the vibe of the Bahia Honda Beach. And then it was taken out by the hurricane, and it'll never be that way again. But it's funny because when we think about why do we do art? Why do we stop and take the picture instead of going on? Why do we paint the painting? It's because that moment mattered, even when it's not there anymore. It mattered, and it does something to us and for people in the future to have that encapsulated moment that meant enough to you that you stopped, right? Our attention and our time is our most valuable asset, no matter what in the world. And it stopped you. And when we think about finding reasons to encourage ourselves that what we do matters, what we do is important, if it was enough to stop you in this busy world, it's important. And lean into that because there are people who want what you're creating and will be inspired to create on their own because of what you're doing. And I think that's something really powerful that you do with your art for people.
thank you for that. That's amazing. And I always tell people I just love to paint memories of where we are, where we should be, and its places. And where you walk by every day and don't pay attention. But when it's on a painting, suddenly it's something, um, because it'll just speak to you. And I've painted a painting, and people will walk by that same spot every day, and they're like, "I know where that is, but where?" And I'm like, "Well, it's where you needed to be." So
That's what I was thinking earlier when you were talking about your art. We were talking about stories and what they mean to us. And I was thinking how we get to create the thing, we get to create the painting or the song, but the beauty and the mystery of it is that we don't get to decide what happens to it next. It lives outside of our hands, of our touch, of our influence on it. Your art is living all of these lives, hundreds and thousands of lives across the world because you created it, but now its impact lies in the eyes of the beholder.
yes. And I always tell people that I get one thing out of every painting. It might not be the whole painting, but it might be one brushstroke that inspires me to do the next painting. Uh, and it could be like you see this, and it could be this line right here, and that's it. That's what I got out of this painting. And then somebody else is going to get something totally different out of this. And that's the beauty about art. It's means something different to everybody. And sometimes people will be talking to me about my paintings, and I'll be like, "What's that? Whose painting's that?" And they'll be like, "That's yours." And I'm like, "Oh," because it's completely different than what I was thinking. But what you are describing, and the beauty that you're describing, that you're getting out of this, is something completely different. And so and that's what art's about, is interpretation and someone else enjoying it.
It's beautiful. And in our modern world where we have a lot of pressures on the artistic community and frankly on a lot of communities, a lot of experts in different fields. You mentioned accounting as a safe job when you were, thinking of what am I going to do with my life? Maybe someone said you should be an accountant. And when in this age of AI, accounting is also not a safe job, right? And so do the thing that helps you eat, but also do the thing that you're passionate about, because this idea of playing it safe, it doesn't necessarily work long term, but if you have the gumption and the focus and the determination and belief in yourself, you can create something.
Yes. And sometimes you just need to feed the soul. It's a whole different food, but you need it.
You do. And I'm so appreciative of the art that you do, the vibrant colors, the way it allows us to escape into a warm memory. We need these warm memories. And also for someone else, it may allow them to envision a better, brighter future that they're working for. Whatever it is doing for you in this moment, your art really captures something so positive. I'm so excited that you've been here. I want to tell our listeners about a really exciting surprise show you have coming up in a few days. We're going to talk about it. This show is going to air on a Tuesday. We're going to talk about it, tease it before on the weekend, because we want our fans in Hawaii to know it. We do have friends in Hawaii. A friend of the show who's been on the show, January Lydell, is an author. She wrote, speaking of accounting and money, she wrote a book called Alina the Super Saver, the Honeymaker Bee book series.
That's cool.
And she's out in Hawaii, and she teaches through her artwork and through her books. She's teaching kids about financial literacy to empower them on those skills. So we have a lot of friends out in Hawaii, and we want them to know that there's something really exciting that Steve Barton is bringing to your neck of the woods soon.
Well, I'll be on Lure Street, and I leave tomorrow morning, actually. So I'll be there all over the weekends, painting in a brand new Tabora gallery, right on Lures Street. And you can't miss us. We're there. I'll be there painting, doing demos. Come by, say hi to me, and just enjoy the time. And there's tremendous amount of other artists in there. And because I tell people, not everybody loves my work. You can appreciate it, you can walk by it, you can do these things, and sometimes it jumps out at you, but it might be something else that jumps out at you there. Um, and I'll look at other people's paintings and go, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing." So there's a tremendous other things there to look at. But I would love for you to come and talk to me personally and enjoy. And I'll be doing some demos. So I'll start with the purple. And I do love accounting, by the way.
You mentioned accounting, so I thought there must be, right? We speak about the things we're focused on.
Yeah, I think there's, well, that would, we're going over it right now. I don't like doing it, but I like it.
Exactly. We'll tell January that you're in Hawaii. And you can see her books are actually in the airport there, which is really cool because it's really neat when local artists or local authors are supported by their community. We love supporting art. We love supporting people who are so heart driven like yourself and sharing your stories. I'm so grateful that you had this amazing discussion with us here on Talks with Dr. Shafer. And I'm just so grateful for the way that you are sharing your story and not only creating beautiful art, but empowering others to become artists themselves or unleash the inner artist.
Yes. And that's the whole thing, is just doing it and enjoying the moments about doing it. And then, and unleashing it. And you're right, because we have so many things have been pushed down, and maybe this painting or the coloring book with me, some random evening, maybe that will inspire you to do something else. And it might not be painting, it might be something else that you'll inspire. And that's what's the fun part. It's releasing it.
Oh, thank you, Steve. I'm so excited. We've shared so much today, and I think people are going to be very inspired. How can they connect with you after the show on social media and your website so they can follow along? They can learn how to get your beautiful artwork if they are so inspired to. How can they connect with you?
So it's Steve Barton Official. You can follow me there, bartonstudios.com. If you hit me up there, it goes directly to my wife, which will then, if you have a comment, or if she can answer any questions for you, if you have any questions on, where my art is, which paintings or anything like that, she will totally help you, because she does all that. It's amazing. I just get to do what I love to do, and I have someone else doing the other thing. So
I can vouch. Awesome. I can vouch for that.
So, but if you have any questions on anything, she's funny because someone comments on brushes, and I have a brush kit, and they'll say something about the brushes, and she'll bring it to me, and she goes, "Why are we using these brushes?" I'm like, "Oh, it's because of this." And she goes, "Okay, now that we can answer that question." So we try to respond to everybody, and we do respond to everybody, actually, unless something goes wrong sideways. It is a computer, so I'm not quite sure how they work. But and if we don't respond, try again, because we will respond. It must have been a glitch.
Exactly. We say bump, like bring up my post, bump this, just bump this up a little bit, because everyone is busy. But at the end of the day, you are so connected with your community, and we just are so grateful for you allowing us to take a peek behind the curtain and you sharing your story and your artwork with us today, and also sharing more about Deborah, who we know is such a big part of what you're doing. And you're just such a dream team. It's so amazing to see. We love it. And again, grateful for your time today. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the show. And we also want to say thank you to our storytellers for being here. We appreciate you too. And we ask that if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show and let us know what topics or episodes you like the most, so that we can bring you more of what inspires you to reclaim your story and build your most beautiful future, and maybe start your painting. As always, until next time, stay safe and take care. I'll talk to you soon.